Well, more than 40 years ago, David Bowie called Devo the band of the future. Now the new wave legends are going to find out if they are going to be inducted after being nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's taken 15 years of eligibility. I spoke to Jerry Casale, who co-founded the band. So why do you think it's taken the Hall of Fame quite so long to recognize that Devo exists?
I think it's because what we did when we did it wasn't what the gatekeepers wanted to see and hear. It certainly isn't what radio programmers who were still, mired in the hippie era wanted to hear. And it certainly wasn't what most record labels wanted to hear. But they saw that we were getting huge audiences back then, and they went, well, we better sign these guys because they know something we don't know. But I think it's because our message was both satirical and cautionary and wasn't involved with the rock and roll mythology of sex and drugs and rock and roll.
Mm.
And
well, let's talk about your message, because you've written very, very recently about it, and it's a kind of it's an alarming message, I think, for a contemporary audience. Tell us about the heart of Devo.
Right. I mean, well, in the 70s, we already felt and saw evidence that Western society was not progressing, that people weren't getting better, and that the future wasn't going to be some egalitarian, utopia, that it was going to be a dystopia, that there weren't going to be any flying cars and domed cities. And what we saw is a breakdown of human consciousness. We saw an acceptance of more and more centralized authority, less ability for critical thought or analysis, and we just saw culture devolving, like almost with a death wish.
Like an unwinding. You weren't completely alone, because W.B. Yeats had this theory of the gyre, and he thought that civilization was unwinding after the millennium. He looked at or would unwind after the millennium. Other people
there were people much smarter and more astute than Devo before Devo that laid all of this out, but nobody listened. And I think it was in novels like 1984, Brave New World, Animal Farm, and it was also in philosophical and political science articles. And the word de-evolution was, the first time we saw it, it was used in a political context about the political situation in Ireland in the late 60s, early 70s, and how politicians were letting things, quote, devolve on purpose because they wanted to see it all come down.
Before we lighten this up a little bit, I mean, you had a very dark experience in 1970, which was shared by all of America and by students, indeed, all over the world. And that, as you say, actually led to the creation of Devo.
Yes, because until then, I think I was, typical of somebody that was 19 or 20 at that time, where you were buying mass culture. Maybe you didn't buy the Vietnam War, but you were buying into mass culture. You were buying into the idea of linear progress, of materialism, of capitalism. And I hadn't dug deep enough. I had not dug deep enough about who was really running the world and how it really worked. And the killings there really led me on a path that opened my eyes. And I started
Kent
listening
State
to really
University in Ohio in May of 1970, when 4 students were shot dead by National Guards people.
Yes. I was in the middle of it. I was a member of SDS, which was a student activist group, which was considered left-wing because we were anti-Vietnam War, and we were anti-central government power. The military-industrial complex we were warning about, and talking about people needing to take back local control of their lives and resisting authoritarian amassing of power. And yes, I was in the middle of it. They shot at us, and they missed me, and they killed Alison Krauss and Jeffrey Miller, 2 of those killed, and they were my friends. And I saw what it looks like to really be shot with real bullets. They were using M1 military rifles, and it was horrific. I was traumatized. I'm sure I had a nervous breakdown. I'm sure that's what it was.
Can I talk, although this seems like a harsh juxtaposition, can I talk about your stage shtick, which persists after all these years? The yellow hazmat jackets,
Yes.
which will be very familiar right now to anybody watching pictures from France, and something that looks like a Lego piece on your head, or a flower pot.
Yes.
It
Yes,
reminds
although it wasn't a flower pot, right?
It's not a flower pot. It's called an energy dome. Just in passing, it's ironic, or maybe it's not ironic, that the protesters in France are wearing yellow safety jackets.
Right. I think it makes sense because, I mean, certainly Devo was partly a protest group. We were a protest against, encroaching stupidity, as I said, and people's willingness to accept illegitimate authority, like I said. And, of course, I gravitated towards working class stuff and industrial wear, A, because it was cheap, and B, because it represented the average person. And Devo wanted to undo this whole arena rock, I'm special, look at my spandex, look at my, platform shoes, look at my long hair, look at me, look at me. We wanted to get rid of that. We were playing to something bigger than ourselves. Devo was bigger than the 5 people in it. And it really helps to grab that kind of working class, mass, disposable wear that's cheap and use that as an aesthetic. And the red hats mostly came from ideas that were laid out by the Dadaists and the Cubists. And, I'd read all that stuff and we liked them because they were pro-information, pro-experimentation. Yeah. We loved that stuff. And that was based on Art Deco ziggurat designs and lighting fixtures. So that's where I cribbed that from.
That's amazing, isn't it? And yet, the kids of that time, of whom I was one, liked Devo because you were fun, and we loved the videos. The whole video thing seemed so fresh and new. You can't underestimate the amount of fun that you must have had doing all this.
Oh, my God, I was having a lot of fun because we were getting to be creative. We were getting to be original. We would think of something and we would do it. And visuals, of course, were part and parcel to Devo. Mark Mothersbaugh and I were visual artists, and we met at Kent State University in art class. So we were doing these things to entertain people, to soften the blow of the aesthetic and the message and the lyrics. We knew very well that you had to entertain people or else you weren't going to get anywhere. And as Bob Dylan had said 10 years earlier, unless most people misunderstand what you're saying, you'll never be popular.
I know there's a long way from being nominated to actually being elected to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I sincerely hope that you are.
Yeah.
If you are, and if you were to be asked to perform, and here we must regrettably leave it for tonight, although I hope you'll come back and talk to us another time, especially if you are elected, what would you play?
Yeah. Well, we'd have to play the song Freedom of Choice. And if we're allowed to play more songs, we'll play Gates of Steel and Whip It. And we will show images of the Orange Beast, the mobster-in-chief that runs our world and is a vexation upon the planet.
Here comes the 8-bar break. That's Devo and Freedom of Choice. And they have until December the 13th. That would be tomorrow, wouldn't it? To wait and see if they are actually inducted for this year. But they've got some very stiff competition. Def Leppard are in there, the Zombies, the Cure, Todd Rundgren, and John Prine, and even Kraftwerk, and LL Cool J, and Radiohead. So anybody's guess who's going to get inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year. I should just say that I should be spending a couple of weeks